Would you like to see a real step change in the culture at your workplace? Maybe you're really tired of seeing employees kind of undermine the performance of the operation and not adhering to the workplace rules or the culture that you want to see, and that might make you angry. It maybe turns your attitude kind of negative and you start grumbling. You grumble about those bad employees and you start wondering how you can fire the worst ones. Okay, I'm going to tell you how to turn this situation around. I'm Jeff LaSalle. I'm your leadership coach from Boosting Leadership LLC, and I'm going to tell you from my own actual experience doing this many times, 4 tips that you can use to fix this situation. Before I do, though, if you would please be so kind as to go down to the bottom and hit the like and subscribe buttons. That helps us out and we keep the videos coming for you. So you're in a situation with a kind of a crappy workplace culture. Employees frequently break the rules, supervisors don't enforce a respectful and productive environment, and maybe don't even adhere to safety rules themselves. That situation didn't occur overnight. It's a natural consequence of many, many interactions that reinforce this poor culture. Much like a dilapidated worksite or extremely poor housekeeping, this took time to develop, and it's going to take time to fix. The same is true about poor culture. Perhaps you inherited this situation, or perhaps you've been a part of creating this monster, maybe unknowingly, but a part of it. Either way, this situation is ripe for improvement, and the good news is that there's tremendous upside, and there's really not a whole lot of downside. It probably can't get a whole lot worse. Are you ready for the main paradigm shift here? This crappy, negative work culture is a leadership problem, and it will not change until leadership, that means you, change your tactics. You see, leadership sets the culture through what we say and what we do, what we promote and what we tolerate. Therefore, it's on us to fix the broken culture. If we say one thing and do another, it's clear that we didn't mean what we said. If we behave poorly, have a negative attitude, gossip about others, including our bosses, or are generally disrespectful, then you've given everyone license to do exactly the same thing. Enough of this role modeling. If you're consistent in this type of role modeling, over time, you will create exactly the poor culture that you are now grumbling about. Since changing culture will only occur over a period of time, we must be consistent in our words and actions over an extended period of time. Indeed, we need to make it a new habit to be 100% consistent in word and deed, and we need to give ourselves the tools to make sure that that habit sticks. Lack of consistency from leadership is the biggest obstacle in creating the culture that you want to see and the results that you want to drive. Specifically, your lack of consistency. It must start with you. Consistency between our words and actions builds predictability, which drives trust and belief that we mean what we say. Trust between people is really just the recognition that I know how you will behave in a certain set of circumstances. I can predict that you will be supportive of certain priorities and decisions, and therefore I can trust that I can take action without first consulting you, without your direct input. This trust drives empowerment, which enables decisions to be made faster in a decentralized fashion. And yet the decisions will be predictably consistent with how you would have decided had they come to you first. That's really what this is all about. If, however, we are inconsistent and leave our teams confused as to what behavior we value or how we prioritize and take decisions, our walk and our talk are inconsistent, then we undermine this benefit. Decisions have to await meetings where situations can be presented for a decision, and everything slows down and gets inefficient. Since many people don't like working in an environment where they feel micromanaged and have to pass every decision through their boss, inconsistency that drives the need for centralized decisions is also going to undermine engagement, and your best employees aren't going to tolerate it. They're going to leave. You're going to have a retention problem. Our consistency of words and actions informs our team what we truly believe is important, and therefore how to behave and what to prioritize. It empowers them to take action independently as they understand the leader's expectations, your expectations. Once people see that there is consistency between your actions, your behaviors, your words, over an extended period of time, they will understand what is expected. Your consistency, your walk and talk consistency, sets and reinforces workplace culture. Therefore, culture setting has to begin with leadership. It has to begin with you. So here's some tips on how to get started. Again, I've done this many times. I've used these tips myself. They work. Tip number 1. First, it's important to define for everybody what it is that we actually want as a culture. You know, you might have this vague impression, I want it to be a happy place, I want people to be respectful. Yeah, write it down. Be specific. Show that vision of what it should be. So we need to establish this in writing, a written set of values to measure against. Do not short circuit this step either, or do it in a vacuum on a Sunday morning at 2 a.m. by yourself. That won't work. You've got to involve others in the development of the values so that you generate buy-in and have more people role modeling the desired behavior. Communicate these values repeatedly and formally to the entire team. In a number of my former operations, we generated written lists of behaviors we would all adhere to and reinforce. Then we all actually physically printed them and signed them on the printed document and posted them on the bulletin board where everybody could see them, and that we had all signed off and all agreed that this was the way we were going to act and this was the culture and the behavior that we wanted in our workplace. Not only did this jumpstart our culture and give us an ideal to shoot for, but it also created such buy-in that employees would call out each other informally if they saw behavior that was inconsistent with these values. This sort of calling out can generate friction. So it was important that we demonstrated to the group how to hold each other accountable, essentially train people how to be respectful to one another and how to, what's that expectation of how you're going to approach something where you know a change is needed. Do it in a professional manner, and when, sometimes you simply need to go get management involved and not try to handle it yourself. So it was important that we trained people how to do this. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is to help ensure that you are consistent in your own behavior over time. You're setting the main example here. So use a reminder to remember to walk the talk. Non-adherence, even if it's done unconsciously, it undermines the trust and the culture building process. Your consistency as the leader is more important than anybody else's. You have the power to undermine this effort with one event of inconsistency between your walk and talk. It's important to remember here that any time you walk past something that you should have stopped and corrected, you have spread the word with a bullhorn that you endorse that bad behavior or situation. You are okay with that going on. If you just walk past somebody not wearing their personal protective equipment that they should have had on and you didn't correct it, you've just said it's okay to do that. You've endorsed it. Everybody go ahead and do that. Maybe you didn't even see it. Doesn't matter. You have to avoid this silent consent. It's critical, therefore, that you are mentally present at all times when you're out and about in your operation. If you cannot be mentally present because you're just too distracted by something at the moment, stay in your office. And of course, I would not normally recommend that a manager stay in their office, but under those circumstances, you might be doing more damage being out and about than staying in your office and processing whatever it is that has you distracted. In my own experience, I found that I needed a visual cue to remind myself to be mentally present and consistent. So when I'm walking around, I might be on a mission to get from point A to point B. My mind is grinding on some problem. I've got a spreadsheet pictured in my head and my face just goes to a scowl and I'm not seeing what's going on around me and people don't want to approach me because I kind of look angry, even though I'm not, just my natural facial expression. That's a problem. So I needed a reminder, a cue to help myself be mentally present and consistent when walking around the operation so that I would see what was going on and so that people felt comfortable approaching me. My trick was to put a smiley face sticker on the door frame of my office where I would see it whenever I ventured out to the operation. Now, this probably seems wicked silly to most people, but hey, it worked for me. Every time I saw that sticker, I couldn't help but smile and snicker to myself a little bit, and remember to be mentally present in the moment and observant of what was actually happening around me. This allowed me to be much more consistent in word and behavior. So even though it's silly, try it. It works. Or come up with your own reminder. Tip 3 is to enable your team to feel comfortable calling you out when they see you behaving in a manner that is inconsistent with the desired principles of culture, which, remember, under tip 1, you got them in writing now and everybody knows them. So you're not going to be perfect, even though you're going to have the reminder there to try to keep yourself mentally present, and you're going to try your hardest to be consistent. Yeah, there's probably going to come a time that you're not going to be consistent. You're going to do something that maybe absent-mindedly or whatever is wrong. You need people to be willing to call you out on that. And so you need to enable your team to feel comfortable calling you out on that. And to do that, you're going to need to specifically and repeatedly tell them. It's not comfortable for somebody to go to their boss and say, hey, boss, you did that wrong. Or, hey, boss, you sent a mixed signal there. Having the written document of what the expectations are is going to help. They can approach you and say, hey, boss, you screwed up number 4. And you'll know what number 4 is from that list. That's good. You want them to be comfortable doing that. And remember, when they call you out, your reaction will determine whether they're ever going to be willing to do it a second time. So even if you're not quite sure that you're correct, or you're pretty sure that you are correct and they're wrong, don't start arguing. Don't be defensive in response. Thank them. This single event can supercharge your efforts. They're going to see that you're being consistent in what you told them to do, which was call you out if they saw something that wasn't in line with the rules. You're being consistent with that message. Very important. Tip 4 is to reinforce the behavior you see that is consistent with what you are trying to drive. So use positive recognition. Make sure it's sincere, make sure it's specific and immediate to drive more of the behavior you want to see. Be consistent and frequent in this praise. That's going to really drive, again, this consistency, and the more of these interactions that you can have, the shorter the time frame it's going to take to make a step change in the culture of the operation. So more positive reinforcement is better. You also need a way to remember to do that as well. So come up with a way to make sure that you're doing positive reinforcement and positive recognition consistently. I like the technique of walking around with 10 coins in my pocket. Every time I do a positive reinforcement of something that's specific and sincere, I move one of those coins from one pocket over to the other side, and at the end of the day, hopefully all 10 coins have moved place. There are your 4 tips to supercharge your results and do so through the power of consistency. Number 1, create the written definition of the ideal state. Involve others in its creation and communicate it thoroughly and frequently to the entire team, along with your expectations that everyone, including yourself, will adhere to this guideline. Secondly, find a way to remind yourself to be mentally present. Maybe it's a sticker on your doorframe, maybe it's something else. Remind yourself to be mentally present and consistent in words and actions. Third, give your team express permission to call you out if you are inconsistent in your behavior. Little subnote here, make sure that you're calling out your boss and your boss's boss if they are not following those rules in your workplace as well. That will really reinforce the message to your team. These rules are for everybody. I've actually had to correct CEOs' behaviors as they walked through my operation in the past. You know, they might whip out a cell phone and be trying to answer a call when on tour in a production area. Can't do that. So if I'd allowed that to happen, I would have undermined a lot of safety rules and a lot of what we've been trying to do with the workforce. I stopped the CEO, told him to put his phone away and that he could take the call later, or if it was urgent, I would walk him out of the operation and he could take the call then. But he needed to put his phone away while we were in the operation. He, of course, complied. He was embarrassed to not have known the rule or to have almost violated the rule. You got to be consistent. Fourth, consistently use sincere and specific positive reinforcement to supercharge that culture building and do so frequently. So there you have it. If you haven't hit yet the like and subscribe button yet, please do, and leave a comment to keep the conversation going.